Hey everyone, and thank you for sticking around last week while I was away on holiday and not uploading. Thank you so much for the 100,000 subscribers. That is absolutely amazing and incredible, and you might have seen my kind of like slightly gushing post that I wrote while I was a little bit tipsy on a beach in the Dominican Republic. I want to say in person, or as close to in person as I can get, to you guys how grateful I am for all your support, to everyone who watches my videos and subscribes and just is a part of my channel. There are so many of you amazing people out there, and I can't thank you enough for everything you've done and for making this dream become like an actual reality. It's unbelievable. I still can't believe I'm lucky enough to do this job, but I'm really hoping I can continue to like live up to your standards and continue growing and learning and making my channel and my videos better and better. I want you guys to keep calling me out when I screw up. I want you to keep telling me what you like and what you don't like, and just keep giving me all that amazing feedback, and we're gonna make something really amazing together over the next few years, hopefully. Thank you for kind of joining me on this journey. I just want to start off this video by saying that, and kind of like, yeah, I'm not very good at this emotional stuff. I get like grackly. Okay. So today's video we're going to be talking about a copy of Creation magazine that I found. This is literally a magazine where they like to pretend they're reporting on the latest scientific discoveries that prove creationism. In general, they just tend to jump on a few scientific studies which may be anomalies, or they just haven't been explained fully yet, or they make you go, ooh, that's a bit interesting, and then they kind of twist them to fit their own agenda. That's what happens in most of the articles in these magazines. I've got a couple of copies of magazines that we can look at. Today, I'm just going to be looking at one article from one magazine, but like I say, there's so much we could potentially talk about. One thing that I think is really interesting that you will notice in not only this video, but in future videos, or you look at the magazine yourself, one thing you'll notice is that half the sources that they cite are simply creation.com. I don't know if you know the website, but it is not in any way credible. It is completely biased, and it's not in itself an original source. All you have to do is go look at the website and you'll know that it's full of bad science. You know, actually, that's a whole other video in itself. The original sources and studies that they do cite in their references are often taken out of context, or not properly evaluated, or the wrong conclusions are twisted or drawn from them in some way. So, you know, on these points alone, I don't believe these Creation magazines are particularly credible on the whole. But over the next few videos, or at least like a series of short videos, I'm not going to do them all in one go because you know me, I like to jump around a lot. I'm hoping to have a look at a couple of specific articles in their magazines. Today we're looking at a particularly short article that's got a lot going on in it. We're going to evaluate their sources, we're going to evaluate their claims, we're going to look at what the actual credible science says, and then discuss the conclusions they've come to. At least we're going to try to. So obviously I'm not going to be able to cover every single article in every single magazine, and there are certain topics that I'm more knowledgeable in than others, and I want to make sure that I'm talking about the ones that I actually know what I'm talking about in, if that makes sense. Like, there would be no point in me covering an article they've done on like astrophysics, because I just don't have the knowledge to talk about it and know too well if what they're saying is legitimate or not. I don't have much of a knowledge in physics past GCSE level, so it's not my strongest point. Whereas things like biology and psychology, it's what I know. I know quite a lot of you are new to my channel, which is why I don't do this in every video, but before I kind of get into the actual like sciencey stuff we're talking about today, because this is a lot more fact-based and opinion-based today. Before that, I want to give you a little bit of background about myself, so you know that I'm not just some 16-year-old sitting in their parents' like living room talking about, I don't know, whatever. If you want to skip past this little like introduction to me, you can do. I'll pop a timestamp here, and you can skip to that, to where we're actually talking about the magazine. So I actually started off studying one course at university, which was biomedical science, which is basically like human biology and biochemistry. And I switched degrees to do a BSc in management, which was a business degree, which I know sounds like a little bit of a DOS to some people. It sounds like a bit of like easy degree, but it wasn't. It was a very science heavy degree from a very good university. The whole kind of point of the business degree that I did at Warwick was to kind of take science and apply it to a real life practical business situation. So like I say, it wasn't just like, ooh, let's talk about like what it means to be an entrepreneur, and let's talk about what it means to be a leader, and let's all sit down and talk about our... It was none of that kind of stuff. Like I say, it was very much an applied science. So of course I had to do some really useful modules that I still use today, like accounting and finance. I had to do stuff like ops management, marketing, e-business and e-businesses and value chains. I had to do modules on equality and diversity, on the ethics of business and morality and the philosophy of business and stuff like that. I had to do this horrible stats module called something like quantitative analysis for business management or something. It was horrible. It was so many numbers. I even took some external modules in like neuroscience and psychology and stuff that were taught by other departments. I did modules on like creativity in business, which were slightly more fun. And then I had the more serious ones, like I say, looking at like the morality and ethics of business and like all sorts of really cool stuff. But yeah, one particular module that I took, which would actually be really useful for talking about today's video, is this one called Emotions in Business. And again, I know it sounds like a bit of an easy module or like, ooh, let's sit around and talk about our feelings, but it wasn't at all. It was actually a really, really interesting module that covered a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of biology, a little bit of psychology. It was absolutely amazing. And like I say, applied it to real life scenarios today and how we can make use of literally hundreds of years of knowledge. It was brilliant. So obviously it started off looking at some like early philosophers and thinkers and kind of, you know, what it meant to be human, what it meant to have emotions, how we started thinking about like, you know, this idea of like a soul or a personality or the consciousness, the subconsciousness, whatever. We kind of covered all that sort of stuff. Then we looked at kind of like what human emotions are, the physiological causes and reactions of them, that kind of stuff. And then, like I say, it was all applied to like a huge range of like business situations. You know, there were some bits that were like, okay, so in regards to leadership, there's like how best to like manage individuals on a team, especially when there's like conflict and stress and when emotions are running high and that kind of thing, how to identify emotions in your team members or colleagues or customers. We also looked at things like how emotions are really useful in marketing. So some buying decisions are influenced predominantly by emotions, others more by logic. So how do you make use of those emotions? How do you play on those emotions? How do you get the consumer feeling the right emotions, that kind of stuff? How do you drive them down that funnel towards being not only a purchaser but a return purchaser, you know, and that kind of stuff. And then one of my favourite bits, or like the most interesting bit, we're looking at market research and how we can make use of understanding facial expressions to help us figure out what consumers like and dislike and stuff like that. Previously with things like market research, it would mostly be like, oversimplifying a lot here, but it would be like showing consumers some like adverts or maybe some products or like whatever, and then you'd ask some questions to be like, you know, how does this make you feel? What is your reaction to this? And they'd tell you. Whereas now we have all these amazing kind of software and programs that can pick up on cues that even the individual isn't consciously aware that they're feeling. So we have eye tracking software so we can figure out where people's attention is on, say, a website or a billboard or an advertisement, something like that. We can use software that recognizes facial expressions to figure out what people think in response to a product or an ad or a website or whatever. It can even pick up little micro expressions that we aren't aware that we're making. So anyway, I could talk about this stuff for a long, long time, but the point is, I studied this stuff, so I know an alright amount about it. That's why I wanted to talk about this particular article today. The article I want to discuss in this video is called Facing Up to Design, and it's a pretty short one. It's simple, it's to the point. Surprisingly, it's got a couple of solid bits of science in there, but that's why the bits that are wrong and the conclusions it draws upset me so much, because it's using like legitimate, useful science, and it seems like it's either being purposefully ignorant or purposefully deceptive. And either way, that rubs me the wrong way, you know? I'm not sure which is worse, ignorance or deception. So to give a very, very brief summary of this article, human faces and facial expressions are so complex, they couldn't possibly have evolved. They must have been designed by God. And it tries to portray a couple of different, I guess, areas of science or scientific study to try and back this up, but there's nothing solid there at all. Like I say, I've done a fair amount of research on this. I've tried to make everything I'm going to say as accurate as possible, but if I do slip up on anything, if I miss anything out, or you disagree with me in some way, let me know down in the comments, because I love it when you guys get involved in the conversation as well. So the article starts, those who would claim that the human face is the result of evolution, not creation, face some huge challenges. For example, the incredible expressivity, it's a horrible word, of the human face is surely way beyond what is necessary for the survival of our species. Firstly, I'd argue that everything the face can do in regards to expressing emotions is or has been useful to our survival in the past. There is a reason for everything, and we'll get to that in a second. And secondly, I'm not sure everyone would agree with this, but I'd argue that all the things we've evolved to be able to do at this point in our life are not only to help us survive as a species, but to help us thrive as a species. So it's not just about surviving to pass on our genes anymore, but it's about growing and expanding as a species as a whole, if that makes sense. At least that's the way I see things. Homo sapiens as a species are quite social animals, and one of the things that does give us an advantage over a lot of other predators is the way we have numerous ways of communicating with each other, not all of them being verbal. So we have hand signals as well. All this flippy flappy stuff I do with my hands is all trying to communicate some kind of point to you. I don't know what it is, but it's here apparently. But like I say, yeah, it's not just through words and language, but our facial expressions convey so much information to other people. And people don't even need to be consciously aware that we're passing on this information or even that we're giving out this information. It's a thing we've evolved to do to help us communicate with each other and therefore help us survive and grow and be successful as both individuals and a big group and a species. Humans have an innate ability to recognize and replicate facial expressions to help us identify who's friend and who's foe. And it helps us send off the right signals as well, so we can tell other people how we're feeling and they'll know not to, kill us. You guys have probably heard about this, but there's a reason why babies who are born blind, who've never seen a smile, will still have like the biggest grins on their face when they're happy, because smiling is this innate way of communicating, I'm happy, I'm friendly, I want to bond with you. It's a signal built into all of us through our genes, essentially. Of course, there are exceptions, but for simplicity's sake, I'm not going to touch on things like psychopaths, sociopaths, people with social issues who have issues picking up on like social cues and stuff like that. Like I say, there are exceptions, but I'm just kind of talking very generally about the species as a whole and that kind of thing. But the point is, to say that our skills have surpassed what is needed for basic survival, and therefore evolution is a load of poop, is just so narrow-minded. It's definitely an ignorant oversimplification and misunderstanding of what evolution is, or rather what evolution is in practice. So yeah, while today smiling at a stranger on the street might not get you much more than like, oh, they're really friendly, I'm gonna open this door for them, that kind of thing. It might not be much of a benefit in that respect. You've got to think about what society was like back when we were developing these kind of, I guess, functions, if you want to call them that, in the first place. A few years back, smiling at a stranger might have been the difference between him shooting you or him letting you come join his tribe, and you've got to remember that society hasn't always been as it is today. And so while some of the skills we picked up were useful once in some ways, that might not be the purpose they serve us today. I know it sounds a little bit wishy-washy, but it's a very kind of important thing to think about. And it's not just about survival, like I say, but it's about thriving as individuals and as a species as well. Being able to recognize facial expressions in others and replicate them ourselves may once have been useful for things like picking the right mate or communicating during shared tasks like hunting. And honestly, it's the same today. And even if our immediate survival doesn't depend on a function really, like, smiling at someone and being able to understand what a smile means, that doesn't mean it hasn't got a function, and that doesn't mean it's not important, and that doesn't mean it wasn't once useful for our survival. When you really think about it, and you take into account all that we know about early life, modern life, and how humans and other animals actually communicate with each other and so on, you'll see that having such a huge variety of recognizable expressions in your face, not to mention all the hand gestures and everything else, you'll see it's not at all way beyond what is necessary. It's exactly what is necessary. So the article goes on and it says, researchers have identified 21 distinct facial expressions, not just the 6 long recognized basic emotions of happy, sad, fearful, angry, surprised, and disgusted, but 15 other combinations of these, such as happily surprised, angrily surprised, etc. Each of these 21 facial expressions is produced by a unique combination of muscles, i.e. different from that of all the other expressions. The human face has approximately 50 muscles in all, with about half being needed for functions such as eating, speaking, and closing the eyes, but the rest are dedicated to making facial expressions. Yeah, so I've no issues with this bit at all. Some pretty really solid science backing it up there. There's nothing wrong with this little passage. It goes on to say, about 20 of these muscles are unique to humans, not being found in gorillas and other apes. Yet, evolutionists claim we share a common ape-like ancestor with them, because all the evidence suggests that we did share a common ape-like ancestor with them. I don't get the point of this line, really. It's like it's trying to be some kind of gotcha moment, but it's not. Because if you're like, you know, ooh, about 20 of these muscles are unique to humans, that means 30 of them aren't unique to humans. That means we share 30 facial muscles with gorillas because we have a common ancestor. And I mean, gorillas is a weird one anyway, because it's almost like they're purposefully picking an ape. Oh, I'm so useless at like grouping animals. Is it right to call them all apes? Were apes, gorillas, rapes? Is that the right term? Tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah, it's like they're purposefully trying to cause problems by picking gorillas who we're not that close to on the tree compared to some other apes. Like, I think gorillas we split from like 7 million years ago, I want to say. However, you take someone like the chimpanzee that I think we only kind of split from, I think it's 4 million years ago, which, you know, 3 million years is a long time. We're much more closely related to them, and I actually found this like 2006 study that notes chimpanzees have an elaborate and highly graded facial communication system that remains qualitatively different from that reported from other non-human primate species. In addition, there are minimal anatomical differences between chimpanzees and humans, contrary to the conclusions from previous studies. So this is a study that was around when David Catchpole, who wrote this article, in 2018, this was around when he was writing the article. So he either didn't do his research well enough, or he willfully chose to leave out this bit of information that shows that our facial structures and the fact that we can make so many facial expressions is very similar to that of chimpanzees. And yes, of course, there are some differences. I think from what I can remember from reading the article, most chimpanzee kind of facial muscles for expressions were mostly based around the mouth and making the mouth do different things, whereas in humans it takes into account the eyes a lot more. So obviously, like I say, there are differences still between humans and chimpanzees, but we're actually very, very similar to them. And the fact that he chose to ignore that and compare us to someone like gorillas, who are a much more distant ancestor and who we have a lot more differences with, feels like he's purposefully attempting to create a misleading narrative, and I don't like that. The article goes on and says, did these muscles really originate by a slow step-by-step process because there were survival advantages in having a plethora of facial expressions? Yes, literally this. Rather, our incredible facial expression expressivity, I hate that word, it's so hard to say. Our incredible facial expressivity instead points to us having been over-designed, which of course implies a designer who did so. No, I completely disagree. If you want to argue this point, you need much more evidence than, oh, I don't see the point in all these stupid facial expressions, so clearly they don't have a use and we didn't evolve because I don't get them. You need a much better argument than that. That just doesn't hold up. If you want to present an argument like this, you need to do at least 3 things, I think. One is explain why these expressions, the facial expressions, aren't useful to Homo sapiens survival in any way, or useful to our lifestyle, or they didn't help us thrive as a species. Show to me why they're useless, and why they've always been useless. 2, you need to explain how the differences between the facial structure of humans and other apes are so completely different that there couldn't possibly have been a common ancestor. Don't just say, oh, it's unlikely. Show me why that's not possible. I need some evidence for that. And 3, show me, using real, legit evidence, how humans and our ancestors' facial muscles haven't changed at all in the past couple of million years. Show me that there's been no change. Then, and only then, once you've done those 3 things, then you can start coming at me with your arguments for why there's a designer, and provide me some evidence for that hypothesis, please. And just gonna throw out a little hint for you. Saying, I don't understand it, so it must have been God, is not a legit form of evidence. This makes me a little bit bitter, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm being a bit snarky today. The article goes on and says, this is in keeping with us having been specially created by the God of the Bible in his image to be relationally emotional, creative, and spiritual beings, contra to atheist Richard Dawkins, who claimed we are mere survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. So this little reference to Dawkins is literally only in here so they can try and mock him, but I find it really funny that obviously this is a quote from his book, The Selfish Gene. Just gonna throw this out there, but I don't think the author of this article has read that book. He's tried to reference it, but it's from the first paragraph of the preface to the first edition of the book. It's literally like the minimum amount of the book that he could have read. I do hope I'm wrong. David, if you're watching this, I doubt he is. Please prove me wrong. Tell me that you've read the whole book. Show me that you've read the whole book. I find it very hard to believe that he has. I just find it a little bit funny. Yeah, the other thing I just kind of like want to point out with this is he doesn't like it because, you know, Dawkins is comparing the human body to like a machine or a series of machines and whatever. Thing is, he's not saying we are a machine. It's a metaphor. It's meant to simplify and explain a really, really big, complicated topic. You don't have to take it literally. That said, I can see why certain religious people, like the author of this article, don't like the quote, because they want to think that as human beings we're special. They want to feel they're special themselves, and I understand it. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. You know, they do this whole, like, we're created in God's image thing. We're emotional, creative, spiritual beings. And I think it's a little bit of an ego thing, a little bit of an ego boost. And the truth is, we're not created in God's image. We're not special. We're animals. We're living things. We work in the same way as so many other living things and so many other animals. All living things ended up here on Earth at whatever time they ended up, basically by pure chance. There's no divine intervention, we're just here. And you know what? It's okay not to be special. You don't have to be. You just have to know that this is you and this is who you are and make the most of it. And I think that's an amazing thing. You don't have to have been put here in the image of God or by some divine right. The fact that you are here is a pretty amazing thing, and you just need to enjoy that sometimes. Anyway, my point is, this is why I think people like the author of this article dislike people like Dawkins, because he's not afraid to say that, you know, we're all just animals with these amazing little chemical and electrical mechanisms in us, working away, keeping us ticking along. The article goes on and says, this over-design of facial expressions is proving to be the bane of engineers attempting to realistically emulate our facial expressions in their android robots. And then there's this big section about the struggles that some engineers are facing with creating realistic robots and the whole like uncanny valley thing. But I don't really see the relevance of this point at all. I know why he's tried to put it in. I know the point he's trying to make, but he's wrong. So I don't like this whole section. Yes, recreating a human face and facial expressions is complex. To try and recreate an already complex organic system with machines is always going to be tough. That's not a surprise. He goes on to write, surely all this shows that evolutionists should be facing up to the reality that our faces, indeed our whole bodies, were designed by someone who clearly wasn't limited by mechanisms, materials, or the space in our heads. No, that is not at all what this shows. Like, not even a little bit. It's like, he says some science, and he's like taking these little baby steps, and he's like getting there, and he's getting there, all of a sudden he's like, oh God! And he just makes this giant leap, and there's nothing connecting it. And it's like, how did you get over there, mate? How? Got a little bit wound up there. Sorry. But seriously, all this robotics bit shows is that it takes more than a year or two to understand and replicate a living being which has been evolving for millions of years. It shows that it's hard to replicate the actions of a living thing with a few gears and motors and other basic material. However, there is a point in this article and the original study that they're referencing that shows that these guys did make a robot that can replicate some facial expressions, and that people viewing this robot did identify certain expressions such as happiness and anger. That shows that it is possible to replicate the human face to some extent, and that honestly it's only a matter of time before it gets better, before we can accurately replicate the full spectrum of human emotions. Yeah, I think he's just kind of missed the point completely, and it's so weird. I don't see how anyone can be convinced by this. He ends the article with just, as the Bible says, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, which again just seems like he's kind of stroking his own ego, telling himself he's special and different and Final little thing I want to do is just look at their sources for this article, because I find this kind of interesting. Out of the 7, we have 1 book from the pretty credible Richard Dawkins. Like I say, it was The Selfish Gene, and I call him credible not as a fellow atheist, but as a very accomplished biologist. Then we have 2 journal articles in here, thankfully both of which are available online, so I could have a quick look at them. One of the articles is about robotics. It's from the Bioinspiration and Biomedical Biomimetics journal. It's a peer-reviewed journal, but other than that I couldn't find out too much about it. I don't know how credible it is. The article itself hasn't exactly been cited by many other authors. It's not had a very big influence on the scientific community as a whole. It just seems to have kind of fallen into the background and been ignored a little bit. I can't really talk too much about the content of the robotics one because it's not my area of expertise. And basically it's just saying it's quite difficult for android robots to replicate the numerous and various types of human facial expressions owing to limitations in terms of space, mechanisms and materials. And then they say how they tried to replicate it by measuring how far and in which direction bits of facial muscle moved with each expression, and then they tried to replicate that in a robot. Nothing too groundbreaking, nothing too crazy. Yeah, that's a thing they reference, that's okay. The other article is actually one that's a lot more relevant to science in general. Basically, it just says past research has always focused on just 6 broad categories of human emotions and expressions, but we think there are a lot more very common expressions. 21. Like, they note, for example, that surprise isn't just surprise, but you can have like happy surprise or angry surprise, and that there are different facial expressions depending on which one it is. So it's pretty interesting stuff. Not a perfect paper, obviously, they never are, but honestly, I have no big issues with this study, and if you want to read either of those, the links are down in the description below so you can go check them out for yourself. So like I said, I have no issues with them referencing these 2 articles in the magazine, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just I don't think the articles support their conclusions. But there are also 3 references to websites, kind of like popular science magazine-y blog website type things. There's Live Science and New Scientist. This one's a difficult one because on the whole, I don't see anything wrong with referencing websites like this in a casual sense. I do it in my videos all the time because I'm like, oh, you know, I'm talking about this topic, if you want to read further on it, there are some links down in the description below. I like to link to these kinds of websites because they tend to put everything quite succinctly and in a pretty easy to understand way. So for a casual viewer of my videos, I think they explain things really, really well. But if I was writing something for a book or a magazine, I wouldn't want to reference journalistic blog type thing. I don't think my words are right here. I wouldn't want to reference them. I'd rather reference the original studies and articles that they were talking about. I'd want to make sure that I actually read the original studies and articles and reference them rather than just reading the summaries from other blogs and journalists, you know? So out of the 2 Live Science posts, one's just a rehash of the facial expression study, and then the other one is talking about the whole uncanny valley thing in relation to robots. It was fine, little oversimplistic, but you get the point. It's alright, whatever. The other article, I think it was also about uncanny valley stuff, but it's now been removed from the New Scientist site for whatever reason, so there's that. And finally, there's a reference to creation.com, which, as we've spoken about, has 0 credibility and is just a bit of a joke at this point. Oh, damn, okay, my camera's just broke as I'm trying to wrap this up, so I'm going to do my conclusion, you know, like this now. Basically, their references to evolution, facial expressions, and even robotics are on point. The science is pretty solid there. But none of them help support the conclusion that the human face is, and I quote, too complex to have evolved. That part has literally nothing to back it up. Like I say, they're taking some solid science and then making these ridiculous jumps and leaps and trying to claim that it supports their, like, weird hypotheses about God and creation and whatever. It's ridiculous. The only people who would read these articles and see them as being legitimate or credible in any way are people who already believe in creation because they're already biased. To an objective reader or scientist or just person, they're not credible in any way. And I say this not as someone who understands evolution and therefore, I guess you could say, believes in it, but I say this as someone who has an interest in science. It's not credible in any way, and I found this so bizarre, and I feel like they're really stretching for content if this is the kind of thing that they're putting out and writing. I'm gonna end this here because, like I say, my camera's dead. I've been rambling for too long. You don't want to know how long it's taken me to film and research this video. It's kind of ridiculous. Let me know your thoughts on this article. Let me know if you've ever read a copy of Creation magazine and what your thoughts on it were. Let me know about what you think of their method of kind of like taking legitimate science and then twisting it to fit their own conclusions. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. I really do appreciate you. And sorry for my little camera mess at the end here, but hopefully I'll literally see you guys again soon. Thank you so much for watching today, I really appreciate you guys so much, and a huge thank you goes out to everyone supporting me on Patreon this month, including Gambit and his chauffeur, Deshawn, Data Jack, Rachel B. Royer, Heidi Matilla, Jaden Shepherd, Corthy, Jaylee Moore, Sir Michael Moore, Christian Oates, Sage Valarial, Greg Ladd, and Lauren Hart. And to everyone else supporting me on Patreon, you guys are amazing, I love you so much. Don't forget, if you want to see more stuff from me, go follow me over on Instagram at Rachel Oates with a 0, not an O, because I'm annoying. I've also got a merch store if you want to check that out. I'm going to be doing some really cool stuff with it this year, but you know, no pressure, whatever. I'll see you guys again soon.